always somebody's going to force them to use these weapons. Like they claim that the Japanese forced them to use the weapons in Japan. So, but let's think it through. Let's see. I mean,
It's not, after the Second World War, I mean, it's not like they're not the only ones with nuclear weapons.
well, that's true too.
See, it was
That's
like,
true too.
And Einstein said that. He said that would be, and
Yeah.
it was Kennedy that said, well, it's senseless that have no one's going to drop the bomb. I think it was Nixon or one of the guys said, no, we can win the war. And they possibly believe they can win the war because the powers that be have places to go if there is a nuclear holocaust. They got places to go. They got places you would not believe they have, and they know how to script it. But I'm curious to see how this affects Trump.
No, let's not get.
Yeah.
But I want to see because the question she put on the table, Munchie, we got to deal with this.
Yeah, well, I think that
Because what I mean, implicit is that to save humanity, we must find a form of appeasement. Now, but then where does that leave Iran, who are the target of this? This is why, in a certain sense, you know, Russia and China talking about be cool, you know. I mean, it doesn't ring with any authority. So, okay, go ahead. Somebody, you know, Butch.
Just because the United States may not be fearing an ICBM hitting this country from overseas, you got handheld nukes.
That's
you got,
right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
They're going to use everything at their disposal.
That's right.
You know what I mean, to settle this thing. And it's not going to be conventional, you know, type warfare, asymmetrical, you know, warfare. United States don't know how it's going to come because everybody hates it.
That's right.
Including a lot of people in the United States.
That's right.
Who are
That's
not from
already
other
here.
countries, yeah.
That's already here.
But,
But
you know,
I think
this is the psychological dimension of war like this. And there is a psychological dimension. And it's like with the bully that you were talking about on the phone. You know, the bully always thinks he or she has a psychological advantage. They might not. They might not. We don't know that. And it is a risky situation and a dangerous one. But the United States forced this upon humanity. I don't see a way out except a resolution of this. So go ahead, Mother.
No, I don't have anything.
I think the world is going to have to stand up and isolate the United States and say no.
Yeah,
That's it.
that's it.
That's the only way it's done.
That's
And
it.
then the
Oh,
young
let me let somebody, I don't mean to keep cutting you off, Munchie.
No, I agree with that. You know, the world might have to isolate the United States. But I had a question relating to our conversations with Lawson, where he would always
Tell
regard.
everybody who Lawson is.
You know, James Lawson was a civil rights leader, a freedom fighter who, you know, came and was in conversation with Saturday Free School. And, you know, he was a theorist of nonviolence. He held nonviolence in the highest regard, saying that nonviolence is the most powerful force in the universe. And he had always held the he held the American Revolution in high regard. And he had, you know, he spoke highly of the ideals of the American Constitution and American Declaration of Independence. And Ho Chi Minh also held the ideals of the Declaration of Independence in high regard. And, you know, previous to that, as a leftist, I had always had a nasty opinion of my own country. And, you know, my question is, you know, things like this make me, you know, not proud to be an American, to, you know, not be very patriotic. I think of Colin Kaepernick, and as soon as he, you know, knelt, I was inspired to say, you know, well, yeah, this, you know, anthem doesn't really mean much to me, to be honest, either. but how do we reconcile, you know, that with Lawson, you know, and how the esteem he held in regard for, you know, quote unquote, you know, American values, what we wish they were.
Well, I see so much this tied up with an identification, like so many people who are supporting this are identified with the state of America and are championing American exceptionalism, calling this guy a terrorist, when you could easily say the same thing about any number of American generals, you know. So, I mean, for me, it's been, I feel so much shame, and it's, I live in Vietnam right now, actually, and I see, and I felt like just so, yeah, so ashamed of America's imperialist actions over the last 100 years. And I guess a good amount of, some of that is healthy, but I do think there is an important ability to differentiate between the arbiters of who gets bombed overseas and how this is working, and, you know, these ghouls that are controlling our country, and the people themselves who will suffer the consequences. That's my little tidbit. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you're completely accurate in describing the high regard of. I mean, I don't think it's enough to say he had a high regard for America or American ideals. I think we have to be more specific, and I think he was very clear that he thought that the concept of violence was so central to American society, and he opposed that completely. And I think he said that several times. And even sort of his thing on why people don't want to accept non-violence was his understanding that violence was just central to an understanding of what it means to be American. And this is why he posited non-violence as an alternative. And I think it would be really important to go back to King, whether it's his Time to Break the Silence or his Christian Sermon on Peace. But I think even King says, I'm not an absolute pacifist. I wouldn't take a stand when there's states involved to never have, or always say it has to be non-violent. But I think it would be important to go back to them and study them to understand how they would resolve this.
That's Amir respond. You want to respond?
Yeah, I think, Lawson was not an American patriot. There's something American about, his progressivism. Would you agree? Like, I think there is, a potential for America to have been something different. Du Bois calls it, abolition democracy. And, abolition democracy and, the potential for America to, be different from Europe and not be an extension of Europe. And, I think I've talked to you about, being, being American and, maybe reaching into the political roots of this country and, discovering new trends, new political trends that, come from old American trends. I think Tucker Carlson and other American nationalists, they have this old progressive American anti-war political tendency in them. When that I forget who it is, Thoreau is speaking to Ralph Waldo Emerson, protesting the Mexican-American War, saying, and Emerson goes to jail, and he said, Thoreau hasn't paid the poll tax, and Emerson says, why are you in jail? And Thoreau says, why aren't you in here with me? It's the moral question. It's more of a comment.
But can I just say, I'd like for Raju to, but just I'd like to put on tape, what about King's essay, My Pilgrimage to Nonviolence? Wasn't, and I would think it's the same thing with Lawson. They had, in a, I'll use a non-belligerent way, said that we have to transcend the West.
That's right.
to discover the truth of humanity. So I know that the reason I bring it up, because a lot of, I had to put leftists and black nationalists reduce King to a mere liberal. And I don't think he was. And I don't think, and what we experienced with Lawson, you know, his revolutionary optimism and was so much on display, as well as his recognition that everything is not tied up neatly. We don't have the answers to all of the problems that we face. But Roger, you want to respond to Samir, and then
I think, I mean, maybe I see what you're saying, that there is a kind of childish rejection sometimes which is popular in leftist circles, and they don't have that. But they're far advanced of that kind of childish rejection, which is just kind of reaction to the society you find yourself in. You know, I'm against this, I'm against that. And that's not, I think they're at a much higher stage, and that's part of their optimism perhaps. And I think that's probably related to this question of Baldwin's optimism in this poem, even as he says we have to transcend this. Yeah, I mean, that's all
let me just say one other thing. This is very important. And the form of internationalism, I know I'm always reflecting upon none of this, that, do you think it's worth going to the rally? And I said, well, I don't think so. But then I said, I had some certain conditions. Because without an internationalism which puts the oppressed people outside of the victims of the American empire, before the American people ourselves. This is a hard thing to navigate, because if you think about traditional leftism, it is the working class's own oppression which will make them predisposed to see other oppressed people as one with them. Well, it never happened, because you can't get, if you can't see black people as part of the same struggle, how are you going to see Iranians? And so I think when King and all of these black people who went to India, and that heroic move, and that took many decades of working it out, it was an act of internationalism. And when Gandhi says, and I don't know how he could have concluded this in 1935, I believe the American Negroes will be the greatest exponents of nonviolence. He was probably right, when I think about it. With all of our crises and problems, and what does that mean in the throes of the most violent nation in human history?
Why do you think we were so nonviolent? I mean, do you think that?
Not because we're non-struggle.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, because I've always could never get my hands wrapped around and things. I know more about it now. Coming here, just getting older, getting wiser, to know how to fight. It's like what way to fight.
Yeah.
You know, I was thinking what you said about being an American, right? Being here. I've left this country a few times. I've always wanted to come back to my neighborhood to see my mother, my family, my homies, my gym mates. When I leave it, to come back to see you. I've never felt anything but that pleasant reason thing ever since they killed Emmett Till, and I see the pockets of it. But I've always felt that I was an American. My father died because of this country. My grandfather fought for this country. My oldest son fought for this country. I have homies, lots of who died for this country. So this country is mine. America is mine. It's not just yours, and it's everywhere. It's the Polish, the Irish, the Italian, it's all of ours. Now, how we do with this thing is a different thing, but you're not going to tell me that I'm not part of this thing. I built the damn thing. And I died to keep it going. Some of the, you know, my uncle told me, and I didn't believe it, that the black soldier was the better soldier. My father was in the segregated army. How you fight? I'd have killed somebody. I had a gun. Somebody couldn't drink out that water fountain. But they won. It was separated armies. But they fought. They fought well. And so this is my country. And I think when all men are created equal, I believe that, man.
That's right.
I don't think I'm greater or better than anybody I've ever met. We all come here like that. We're all in the same field. So that part of it is great. But why we just can't get it together for some reason? There's a lot of reasons for this. It's just like this thing that just happened yesterday. I don't think anybody has the faintest idea what's going to happen. And if you have any insight for anything, you got to be on pins and needles. How can you not? You listen to a couple of Fox News and these guys. Forget this senator. He's right up there, up Bucks County. The arrogance of these guys. And these are the same people who don't fight. The people who fight these wars are the poor people, man. Black and white. These are the guys who will fight. And they come back and get mistreated. They don't get nothing. So, but I've always asked that question. I've come to realize why this is. I come back home to South Philly. I come back home to see my friends, my family, and all that. But this country is mine too, as well as theirs. They ain't gonna tell me that I ain't part of this thing. You might not think I'm part of it. That's cool, but I ain't part of it. And you're not gonna tell me I don't have certain rights.
He's not saying you say you
no,
don't.
no,
That
no,
ain't-
I'm saying, but that's what they say.
Yeah,
They try to make you believe. The power structure will try to make you believe you're not part of this
No,
thing.
that's what they. Well, you're not worthy.
No, you're not worthy. Oh, that's a good word.
Yeah.
You're not worthy
No,
of
man,
it.
this-
Yeah, because I couldn't read well, I'm not worthy.
Well,
Yeah.
come on, man.
Yeah, or anything. Yeah.
I wanted to add to what you said about, why would Gandhi use nonviolence. At one time, Phil Logan in this classroom told me, philosophers are never kings. What a philosopher does is search for the truth.
That's right.
And, why is that? Well, in any civilization history, and it reminds me of Gandhi. Gandhi was really well educated, went to England, was a lawyer, could have been anything, and he chose to be amongst the people and have no belongings. And, I think he used nonviolence because it was, he called it the truth force. And, maybe that should be our weapon too.
I think, because I'm glad you guys kind of spoke up, because I'm thinking about this, especially after reading Serafina's article. She talks about a nation within a nation. African Americans as a nation within a nation, right? African Americans, I don't think yet see that, or during this time, young black people don't see that, and so I think it's key with Munchie. Munchie talked about, how his grandma had said for him not to fight, that you won't solve anything if you fight. Oh, your mom, my
Man was
bad.
here pick up a brick.
Right. Okay, right. But I think there's a waking up in imbibing nonviolence. There's like you wake up,
I'm sorry, Jake.
there's a wake up call within nonviolence.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Because it is historic. Johnny said it was through Jainism that he found nonviolence. It wasn't his creation. It was historic. And it's just like, and I think part of it is this Christ, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That is their what were the teleological?
Yes.
That is African Americans' manifest destiny, so to speak, is this sort of this God of forgiveness, because God did end up forgiving the Romans. He didn't come down and smite them as he could have, and so that's why I think and this is where it comes in when Diane Nash said, in the 20th, the invention of the 20th century, whereas violence was the greatest invention of the 19th century. So that's where this is what I see. It is not nonviolence or non-existence, as Nanata's pointing out. This could go nuclear, and then we all die. And then we haven't gotten anywhere, nowhere.
Yeah, but I think this is a really important. But first of all, how often we are forced to return to the African American people. It's unavoidable that if there is a way out in this country, it will be through the African American people. Part of the problems of white America is that they don't want to accept black leadership. That's why I'm not that we go to the march. I'm not against going to the march, but there's certain things about the march that I don't like. See, I don't think the white left or white people in general have the moral authority to lead black people. It's the opposite. And I think it's because of this thing that Gandhi saw. And he had to be a deeply humble man. He's from this great civilization, you know? And here, these people, you know, we're back to the Dark Princess. Gandhi saw what this group of revolutionaries from the darker races could not see. Because don't forget that they did not believe that black Americans, Negroes, were qualified to be a part of a grand alliance to overthrow colonialism, right? Now that novel was published in 1929. Howard Thurman and Sue Bailey Thurman go to India in 1935 and 36. And Gandhi saw what few people in the world saw. This people from what Du Bois called a civilization in potentiality, a civilization in evolution, that if nonviolence as a principle of struggle, not as a principle of surrender. See, that's what, and probably the English, that's why in Gandhi used the word ahimsa. Yeah, and satyagraha. You know, we stopped using those words in this year of Gandhi. We started out using them, but we stopped. But
You're pretty smart.
no. But the thing is, the English language, which puts non before violence, or puts violence, it's a negative rather than a positive statement. And because of the way the English language works, we get it confused. But somehow Gandhi saw the African American people as an equivalent civilization to this great ancient civilization. And by the way, Du Bois saw us in the same way. He saw us as a nation within a nation, a civilization in potentiality, a life world. And sometimes it is a bit insulting, I have to admit, being called to a rally by white folk. Who are you to call us to anything? You know, y'all need to come to, why? I don't need to come to anything. Especially when y'all boycott the year of Gandhi, how are you going to talk about peace anyway? But that's a whole other question. But go ahead, Butch, I'm sorry.
No, on that question of that statement by Gandhi, I've been chasing that since Lawson. And, you know, of the fact that the Negro people of America was going to take on that legacy of nonviolence.
Yeah.
And once again, in Du Bois's Dust of Dawn, he's having a conversation with Van der Man, which is a made-up character, a white guy, you know. But he gets to the part about art. If you don't mind, read a little bit. It says, the white guy says, "What great works of art have we made?" And Du Bois said, "Very few," you know, tongue-in-cheek. He said, "The pyramids, Luxor, the bronzes of Benin, the spears of the Bongo, when Melinda sings, and the sorrow song she is always singing. Oh yes, and the love of her dancing." And he says, "But art is not simply works of art. It is the spirit that knows beauty, that has music in its soul, and the color of sunsets in its headkerchiefs, that can dance on a flaming world and make the world dance too. Such is the soul of the Negro." He's talking about art as peace, that soul force.
And truth.
And truth.
And art as a people.
Hey.
What you say, Jake, about our manifest destiny playing on the dark destiny of the white world? when you spoke about our manifest destiny being in the spiritual, that our spiritual destiny is counterintuitive, it may seem strategically flat-footed, but I think you're onto something, and I'll have to get back to you, but I have to really spend some time with that, because when Tony was saying earlier, what is our way out of this? Because I mean, the potpourri, the smorgasbord, the dim sum, the buffet that we have here in free school gives you the whole menu
That's right.
and recipe of what we're facing. And like Munchie was, how could you not be on pins and needles if this is the context in which we're living in terms of the challenges, and then you sit in an assemblage, in a congregation like this, and you have this diversity, this intergenerational, multicultural assemblage of minds and spirits that are all focused on this one thing. What you're saying about the manifest destiny, where we rise, is in the spiritual, in the artistic, in the aesthetic, in the connection between goodness or brightness and fairness and beauty, and the power that that has, which is in what it is not. We are not powerful in the sense that the majority is in terms of farms and money and a host of other things, but we have an abundance of spirit. And we have a destiny that is manifest in us to forgiveness, your word. You said the manifest destiny of our people is forgiveness. And the power of that is in what it is not.
Hey, nonviolence.
It's and if you, my next thought is that if you multiply that awareness and that conviction, which dovetails with the beauty and the truth of what he just read from, then that's the nuclear option.
What is the nuclear option?
The nuclear option is when you embrace the manifest destiny of the people of color.
Right.
We're all oppressed people
That's right.
in the sense that you have been wronged. And there is no way that you can see immediately how you're going to right it materially. But what you're saying, Jake, about a manifest destiny in the moral realm is that you can see it metaphysically. You can see it in the higher realm. This is what he was speaking about. That's where we see it. And we do have it. We do have it. I often say to my friends in Delaware County, where I'm one of a few people of color, but there's a purpose to me being, and I have to listen and deal with the feelings that Tony has about the leadership of whites in a moral realm,
That's right.
and so on and so forth. I mean, I have to deal with that, but I know that where I have to go is where you're going. I can't stay in that attitude. I have to open it up. Okay. And I tell them that there is a place for that learning, but it's learning by observing and confession. You just be there and let them sit with it. But when I was a kid, and my cousins in Charleston were arrested at the lunch counter in downtown Charleston, okay, during the sit-in. And the names of everyone arrested was published in the paper to embarrass and shame. Like, being in prison today is a sign of defiance, you're a political prisoner. But to be a jailbird, when I was a teenager, was a disgrace. It was a total disgrace. And when I saw that, I said to myself, the sacrifice that we made, enduring the hoses, the dogs that were let loose on us, I saw those images when I was 14, 15 years old, and had just integrated to white school. and went to the school with the white nationalists. Then when I saw the March on Washington, and then when I saw them join in for the big symbolic, okay, they went and they wanted to be part of that history. It goes to the power of what you're saying, Jake, about our manifest moral destiny to lead. Because I think those religionists said, my God, how can we not join hands with them? They may not have stayed joined with us, but it called them out, and they had to see it. So, I mean, that standing, even though you're shamed, it gets a bit uncomfortable to be the long-suffering one, to be the one that always has to carry the burden. It packs a powerful punch.
Yeah, can I also comment on what Jake said? Because, Jake said that Gandhi he didn't discover nonviolence, out of thin air, but he got it from Jainism. And, Emily wrote that article about, being rooted in China. I want to be Chinese American, not Asian American. Now she wanted to be rooted in a civilization. She made a really good, argument about being rooted in your own civilization. Right. And there's also, that quote that, is off-cited. I think it comes from a Christian theologian about standing in the shoulder of giants, and that's where knowledge comes from. And that's part of the problem with postmodernism, is it wants to just reinvent everything from new. It doesn't want to stand on anything old. And then what Grady is talking about, so just something reminded me that nonviolence was never about, an individual, but it was about the bystander. Forcing them to say, no, you have to be this. There's no question about it. You're supposed to be the church. And that's where I see the power of nonviolence.
Wow.
No, I didn't have nothing to say. I was just listening and just happy I'm here to listen to this. Because this is very refreshing to hear what I'm hearing today. Because it's really a pivotal moment, and I don't think anybody can really comprehend something's going to happen. Something is going. It's like anything else. If I have never understood how people thought that they could spit in another man's face and him not do nothing. And for them to think that they can go over there and do this and nothing's going to happen. And they're selling this like we did the world a favor. If you listen to them, and the thing that I want to see now is how many people buy that. How many people buy that? After Vietnam, but this is going to be bigger than that. This is going to make those little Korea wars. If you talk to older people, which I do all the time, I belong to this group called Silver Sneakers. I might be the youngest person in there. I can't keep up with some of these people either. And we do exercise and stuff with chairs and stuff. But if you talk to them, they'll tell you. I talked to an old guy a couple of days ago. He said it's going to be a world war.
Well, they've been predicting that for the last
Yeah.
So I don't know about them old people. But I would say this. A lot of theory of social change and theories that talk about a vanguard. I don't like that word, but you have to have an intellectual leadership. And we are in the throes not just of a possible war, but a great ideological struggle. And a great ideological struggle. Yeah, and it does involve the moral questions of love and truth, of violence and nonviolence, of art. So I said, but Mark, I'm not opposed to coming, but I'm opposed to most of the events that you've had up here. Wow. Especially the one on King, where you had, quote, queer people. And he said, look, Tony, but wait a minute, I wouldn't censor anybody that wants to bring a queer politic. I said, no, but queer politic is not the same as homosexuality. That's right. That's right. I said queer politic is a politics. And you don't have to be a homosexual to be in queer politics. I know this because I know several cats that were the vanguard of it back in the 90s, in particular a philosopher named Tommy Locke, who might not be well known in these circles, but I don't even know what a man is these days. I hope he's still alive. But they were talking about queer theory. They were not talking about gay liberation as it was called back then. So I said, no, man, no, a queer politic is not a politic of homosexuality. And then I went on to say to him that even if there is a politic of homosexuality, that does not rise to the moral or political level of the politics of black liberation. So if you want an identity, you have to be either with the forces of freedom, gathered around the fight for black liberation, or with the forces of reaction, gathered around white status quo. You can't have it both ways. So then we start, now I'm his old head, granted. And he got to show me some respect, which I don't get enough of, by the way. So,
Okay, go
oh, excuse me.
No, I'm sorry. I was going to ask you a question.
He calls you a story. I'm learning from him, telling stories.
Right, you went on, right up to something.
But he's a storyteller too. Yeah, but I say this to say, if we're going to do King, we're going to do King. We ain't going to have all these extraneous theories about whether or not he had extramarital affairs. You understand? I mean, you read Socrates and Plato, and that's all they did was have they didn't even have marital affairs. Everything was extramarital. But suddenly, because King advocated a Christian nonviolent ethos, he can't have no flaws. And then anything, so we went, I say this to say, if you want to, I said to him, if you want to talk about King, we're going to talk about peace. World peace. And this is what has been diminished and distorted. The only reason I want to bring this up is just to say that we're in the throes of something much bigger than ourselves. And Michelle Yuan brought up last time, I think the time before, she asked a question. And it was a bold question. I wouldn't even have the courage to ask it, because, you gotta come out to she said, should we even support queer liberation? And she said, because we're dealing with Baldwin. And remember, Baldwin said that whiteness is a white invention of white people, so they don't have to deal with who they are. You know what I'm saying? And as we discussed this, it became apparent that queer theory is nothing more than a new version of the white man's burden.
That's such a critique.
Yeah. Go ahead. Well, go ahead, Grady. I mean, you were going to say.
But to just
Go ahead.
to absorb what you said, and said there's no queer liberation, but there's liberation of queer people.
That's right.
Okay, and that liberation has to be subsumed under the liberation of all people.
That's right.
And that
starting
those,
with black folk.
Exactly. And that those, any other liberation with a qualifier before it that's part of this identity and intersectionality is really just the wrong wording. And
Well,
because
it's not, but I think it is a conscious, intentional effort to undermine.
It's insidious.
That's right.
It's insidious. May I read this?
May I just say one last thing?
Okay.
And See, a lot of this flows out of the debate between Marxism and postmodernism, which is a European debate. And it involves Foucault, it involves Derrida, all of the postmodern theorists. Now, but then they, as is the tendency with white thinkers, everything they do and say is universalized. They don't know a black person from a can of paint, let alone black history, but their theory, because they are white, can be applied, Foucault can be applied to black people, even more than Baldwin. That's the claim.
It's the same thing.
Now, yeah, so, but here's where we run into the great question. If Marxism failed, is the answer postmodernism? And the other thing is, and this is in Du Bois's Black Reconstruction, is not the black struggle, well, I'll put it this way, the U.S. version of what they talked about as the class struggle in Europe. In other words, it's just something else I want to say. You see, the postmodern theorists make the claim that the working class has failed, that it had been absorbed into the system by the perks, by the white privilege, and all that type of thing. Okay, partially right. But does that end the class struggle? No. Because you got black people. The black worker. You understand? So the class struggle in the United States does not proceed the way it would in Europe. The other side of it is that because of what Baldwin says, the white masses have lost class identity and class struggle. But black people have. But you can hear it in here. In the free school, you listen to black people speak in here. And we ain't all PhDs. I'm the only one, maybe. So most of the black people are working class. Listen to how they talk. It is not what you hear in white leftist circles. Because they have abandoned the class struggle themselves, the leftists, and have abandoned black people. But, so I just say that to say, now, with Mark and them up at Uncle Bobby's, and this is why it's so treacherous going up in there, because you end up being like the bad guy, because you're going to have to disagree with most of them up in there, you know, and they want you to, no, well, you didn't, because you got a lot of black intellectuals who go with queer theory, because their jobs in the university are dependent upon that.
That's the paradigm.
It's
that
just,
way of thinking
that's
is the ruling paradigm in
That's
the
the
academy.
ruling paradigm, yeah. Oh, God, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brady. I talk.
It's going to be, are we going to lunch?
But-
Maybe not. But
What? Yeah, we going to lunch.
But I think
you just,
my mind is in, I've been worried to death all night thinking about this bullshit.
you have just, I'll write you.
Okay, okay. Yeah.
I'll write you.
You can call. I do answer.
I
Okay, if you don't like her, that's all right. Okay, all right.
Okay. What I
You have some of the strangest texts, the way they come over that I've ever seen. That's why I say that. Your texts come with all kind of memes and pictures, so I'm a little bit confused.
Okay,
But go, we can talk about this.
I'll deal with
Okay.
we can do that. We can do
Worse
that.
than
But I'll have to write my stuff down.
Let him read, please.
Yeah, wait, what are you reading from?
I'm reading from Social Black Folk. Okay,
Alright.
I finally got my 3 books. I got them just the other day. And I read the introduction to The Dark Princess, and I noted that we talked about the series from Oxford Press, and they're redoing Du Bois for this new generation, blah, blah, blah. And then I noticed that in this, each essay is preceded by a quote from a white person, which I thought was right in line with his view about the relationship between his thought the double consciousness, the veil. I thought it was brilliant.
Interesting.
Brilliant. So this one I pick Of the Sons of Master and Man by Mrs. Brown. I guess it's Elizabeth Brown, I guess. Life treads on life, and heart on heart. We press too close in church and mart to keep a dream or grave apart.
Could you read that once again? I didn't quite understand all of it.
If you ask me, because you always do this, could you speak on it? I'm not ready, believe it or not, I'm not ready to speak on it. But I put it out there, so whatever you get, you share it with me. Then there's another thing that I read, because I was gobbling all this up when I got it in the mail, and I have a question, and it's a dumb question, but I'm sure you could answer it for me, but I'll do it later. Of the sons of master and man. This is the quote from the 9th essay, which I don't think is accidental, but we'll get to that later. One short of 10, but that's another riff. Of the sons of master and man, life treads on life, and heart on heart. We press too close in church and mart, the marketplace, to keep a dream or grave apart. When you talk about false equivalencies and you talk about co-equal moral position and paradigm and frameworks and so on and so forth, this is what she's versifying in like 4 lines, and it rhymes. Because a lot of times when poems rhyme, people tend to think it's something like frivolous, it's like fashionable, it's not deep. But this woman, if I remember her, because I don't read much literature, I read nonfiction, but you brought me into this. Oh my God. You brought me into this. You brought me into this. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, we should give this poem to Mark at Billy Bob's. Because this is a poetic, this is the poetic version of your prose critique.
Moral relativism.
The moral relativism and the false equivalencies and so on and so forth. But when my mind just flipped, and I was going to call you, Tom, believe it or not, when I got this and say a whole lot of things, then I was going to text you, and then you commented on my text months before I said, I'm not going to bore it. I'll leave that alone. But I thought, when I first came to preschool and I was flipping and just buzzing from heat in here, and I was asking about what is Du Bois' spirituality, and what I got was that Du Bois has embedded in this that the physical body is one manifestation of reality. It's the condensation of spirit into matter, and it goes from dense to less dense to ethereal. So there's a physical body, there's the soul, which is your thoughts, feelings, and so on and so forth. Then there's your spirit. That's a finer level of being, manifestation, reality, and expression. Poetry is within the spiritual realm. He could have named this book anything, obviously. He chose souls intentionally, but that is not. He also understands the spirit of black people, and he knows the distinction in that aspect of us. What I wanted to do with this, on my infinitely Sherman retired man, is I want to unearth, I want to do the archaeology of the spirit in the souls of life. Because he is addressing the problematic of our forgiveness, the manifest destiny of forgiveness, because that moral imperative for us, which Jake said, I don't think Jake fully got what he was saying. I'm going to write him and remind him. Okay? Is that this manifest destiny, the moral manifest destiny, is justified, it's warranted, it gets its legitimacy from a spiritual reality. There's your metaphysic, you cannot get away from it. That metaphysic is automatically invoked when you talk about what ought to be the case. and how things should be here and now. He knows that.
Yeah. This is very important. Because if, as an oppressed people, if we don't have history, there's no hope. And this debate within the academy about historicism and essentialism versus relativism, these are their debates. You take, and that's why Du Bois, as you say, you can read this Souls of Black Folk as teleology. Certainly, but can I just say a small thing? Because he uses soul, and he's drawing upon several things, including Hegel.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. Because he studied him in
I
German.
read that. I read that in your book. I didn't know
But let's not think he's a Hegelian.
No, he's not. He's not.
But the concept of spirit, of that conditions and shapes the mind and intellect. And it goes undefined right now. But to be an agnostic, he pays too much attention. I'm meaning it in to spiritual and religious matters.
Okay.
The chapter called "The Faith of the Fathers," which is the great study of Black African American religion and its connection to the aspiration for freedom. The first chapter of our spiritual strivings. Come on, man. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Wait, I was going to read that one.
Go ahead.
Wait. I think it was by Omar Khayyam.
Yeah.
Oh, just go on. I have to look.
Yeah. So I agree with you that there is a lot going on with Du Bois, and the thing that I appreciate, he is not afraid to speak in unconventional ways, in ways that upset existing status quos and paradigms. This book, at that time, and maybe for this time, is as revolutionary as you get, because he is discovering who the most oppressed are. Who are they? Do they have agency? Do they think? Do they have because the slave narrative, the slave philosophy was, the philosophy of the slave, that we didn't have souls.
Weren't human.
Huh?
Weren't human.
That's my point. How do you deal with this? And how many more times must we say it? That it is believed in American culture that we don't have a soul, that we are inferior, that we are not human. This is still the prevailing concept. And if you are like us, American Negro, we deal with this every day of our life from birth. It's not a moment of peace. Am I lying?
No. If you don't come out of a good household, and because I've seen it, and to teach you who you are, what you are, that your self-worth is more than just this pigmentation in your skin, and you come from a family structure. I was blessed to come from a good family structure, on my mother's side, my father's side. So if you don't have that, and somebody don't grab you when you're real young, you can get really twisted out here. You can think that people hate themselves. Someone said years ago, people treat people the way they feel about themselves.
Right, true that.
And so you can really, if you're not, you're bombarded with this every day, and now it's really crazy. To think that we like slavery, that was something that, and you have black people. It's just I see this is where me and Tony hit the R's a little bit. There's black people have such a integrated hatred for each other. Do things that is just as bad as any white person on the earth.
We don't disagree on that.
Yeah. Okay.
We
Yeah.
don't
No, we do.
Oh, man, we talk about that all the time.
But the thing is that, I take local politics. Take local politics. Nutter was the one that ruined my neighborhood.
Mayor Nutter.
Mayor Nutter. He was the one that friends I've had all my life were forced to move. The taxes on 17th Christian now $7,000. People can't afford that on fixed incomes. And so he was like, none of them did that. They could have looked out for us. They could have, we put them in the office, they go in them offices, and they do the switcheroo, whatever happens to them. But it's this mindset that the guy that gotta be on top all the time. You know, where that comes from, I don't know, but it's not just one group. It's this whole, like I said, none of them want to run and devastate South Philly. The people are moving out. I'm missing every time I turn around, thinking about somebody, and they're gone. They're gone because
See, and today everybody's a civil rights leader.
yeah. We got all these so-called leaders.
And they ain't no, they're as far removed, like
Yeah.
Obama's a civil rights leader.
What's the guy that used to be on television, your buddy, the college from University of Pennsylvania? Dr. Eric Dyson.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he done disappeared too, ain't he?
No, he's out with a new book on Jay-Z. Let me let Zakia come in.
Yeah.
So two comments. This has been a very wonderful conversation. Two books, well, one book, When We Rule by Robin Williams. He's a British author. And When We Ruled talks about the beginnings or early Africa, before it was named Africa, of course. But I like the book, and it's open because it talks about when Europeans first came to Africa and what they saw. The establishment of nations, of civilizations, of dynasties, of politics, of military, of regalia, of status, you know, and they report all of this. And then they come back, and now they're explorers, adventurers, missionaries, and then after that, you know, the military comes. And so it talks about how we as various nations of African people, you know, didn't have this kill, hate, maim, destroy attitude. So it was like, you know, we fought and we didn't get along. We kind of say, okay, you want that land over there, you know, okay, you over there, we over here. But they found out that these people had a different mindset, that they were not honest. So even if they said this was mine and that was yours, eventually they came and they wanted to take everything. And by the time the Africans figured out that these were not of like kind of mind spirits and that they didn't mean the same things, it was too late and we had been overrun. The next comment is Dr. James Combs, who there's a YouTube, Bill Moyers and Dr. Combs. His book is The Cross and the Lynching Tree. And to my friend's comment over here about this trilogy that Du Bois talked about, Dr. Combs addresses it in a much deeper mindset in terms of how we were always able to rise up, even though being oppressed and downtrodden, but that we had spirit, and that spirit was a thing that we knew there would be more to look forward to, there was still something. And I add that to this conversation in terms of the humanity of black people. You know, we have never been able to wage war here in America, and we never will be. The war we have to wage will have to be a spiritual war. You see, it would have to be a spiritual war because that's the thing that we have most of and control. The question will be how to get all other people of hue and of melanin enriched body to understand how to join forces and create this spirit, this energy. You see, because military might we've never had. And if we get it, it's not going to be any comparison to what we're fighting against. You see? But we have to come with a different kind of energy, and I believe that we do have it. We do have ESP, extra soul perception. We do have we do have it, and that we can conjure it. It's not about your political ideology or your philosophies or theories. It will come down to whether or not you really believe that we can win this thing. You see? And that's where I see the peace being able to be enacted, invoked, and I believe that we can win.
Just to tag on, I mean, because that makes me think of like, you know, because you said like the war will be that of spirit,
Yes.
right? And that's what it made me think of Muhammad Ali. and how he was a warrior on 2 levels. He was a warrior in the ring, but his tremendous energy.
Yes.
Emily had said, kind of in passing that, there was this joy she saw in Muhammad Ali, right? This thing of like, I am the greatest, despite, what it is that you're telling me of. You know what I'm saying? But having that kind of spirit, fighting this war, and that's why he was so dangerous on that spiritual level, because he had that energy to fight back and say, no, I don't believe in this war in Vietnam. No, I'm not going to kill my brother. No. You know what I'm saying? To stand up and to fight on both levels.
He had the teachers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and
That's
the
right.
lessons that tell him who he is.
And he did, but he also had a strong woman.
Yeah,
But
well,
the history of this guy was, he was about to quit. She just wrote a book.
Who is she?
his first wife,
The second
the
one.
second one.
The
Oh,
baby.
yeah, Khadijah.
Khadijah.
Okay.
The real pretty one. She got there.
Yeah, all of
She,
them pretty.
yeah, but no, he admitted it. He admitted it. And Rockman will tell you, he was about to go do this, because all he wanted to do, see, they put you in special service when you go in the army. You can box, sing,
Right,
play.
right.
And he was about to do that. They don't tell you that sometimes you go in there and you don't make it, they put you in the war.
Yeah.
They do that to a lot of guys. But he was about to do it. She was the one that said, you better not. She was more Muslim than he was.
Well, she was born Muslim.
She was born Muslim.
Makes a
And
difference.
there's a lot of stuff you hear. Now, I could be wrong too, but it was Rockman who brought him to teach the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. Rockman was the one who brought that there, because it was big in Kentucky. His brother, living by himself now. He lived off a check. You know what I mean? So it is, me and Tony were just talking about Ali, about the $60 million that was left, and his children got none of it. They got none of it.
Why?
Yeah, because his first wife, his wife here,
Fourth wife.
his fourth wife, whatever she took it all. Yeah, but that one go, yeah, she did. This kid, if you could do the WWE shit, they're working for the state, not that they shouldn't work.
Like you ain't on it.
What? The
You
state?
want it now,
Yeah, I want to
too.
stay too. God bless the state,
you-
brother.
WWW shit.
Oh, I can't.
Yes, you do, because you told me you look at all the fights on
Yeah,
there.
well, on
Like,
YouTube,
like
I
you
don't know
so-
how to control it though. I get it on television.
Okay, I'm not- Like you ain't on it.
Yeah, you'll see them in there, what they went through. He has a son that needs some help. And what they went through. But yeah, I'm not saying he wasn't a strong brother, he had to teach him Elijah on. But don't forget her. She's writing a book about that, because she said she met Master Fard Muhammad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he did have that thing, but also did a whole lot of guys. You know what I mean? Who came up in that era, who had that. And it went somewhere. I don't know. It just went somewhere. We don't have that spirit anymore. No one has it. I don't think. You know what I'm talking about? Like that.
Unique period in history.
What'd you say?
I said that was a unique
Unique period in history. It was. It really was. And we as I think that if you're a righteous person, it doesn't matter what color you are, you can do the righteous thing. If you're not, you're not. If you have a righteous being in your body, you're gonna say that's wrong. That's wrong. You know what I mean? If you're not, you're not. You see it in the law all the time. Judges, we used to go in the union, right? And then God told me that one time. He said, Muncie, they don't care about your black ass, but they know it's you today, them tomorrow. And that's what they do. I've seen judges do that. I keep talking about. We was down South Carolina, and they were down there when they played the flag. You got to stop. You don't have to salute, but you got to stop on any naval base. Well, they had this big rebel flag flying down there, so we ain't stop. They called us in this room. The flag was about that big. We sit in front of this guy talking. I'm saying, oh shit, we're just gonna be back. We out of here. We going back on the next plane.
Yeah.
So we told him what happened. He said, I'll look into that, and they took that flag down. Either right down South Carolina on that base, he took that flag down because he knew it was wrong. It wasn't that he was raised like that. I don't know if he was in that stuff anyway. But when you find people like that who want to do the right thing, they're going to do it irregardless. And then when you find people who go along to get along, you find them too. You know what I mean?